Thank you, David. I guess since this is recorded, my name is Ricky R., and I'm an alcoholic. And if somehow I make it to midnight, I'll be sober 35 years tomorrow. And I really can't hardly believe that. I mean, if you had to live in my head, I cannot believe I haven't run down some rabbit trail and crashed and burned and got drunk and lost my family job. It amazes me. It really does. Uh, Alcoholics Anonymous impresses me. It doesn't impress me that I have 35 years. What impresses me so much is there is a program whereby a guy like me that could not stay away from a drink has been able to stay away from it this long. And I mean, all I got to do is take about 10 steps in my house. There's vodka, there's wine, there's beer, there's a half gallon of one of those high dollar brands of tequila. I see some of you watering at the mouth. But my wife drinks, but she doesn't drink like me. And if you would have told me 35 years ago, one day you'll be in a position of neutrality, safe and protected, and you can be around alcohol, and the thought of taking a drink just won't come around. I would have told you you're crazy. But that didn't happen day one. I'll tell you that. But and I am a little goofy. Matter of fact, I've done some stupid things sober. Uh, as David mentioned, my sponsor is Gary Kincaid. We've traveled the roads. I have figured it up after this past weekend, unless I've forgotten some trips. We've been in the car together over 13,400 miles. I mean, we've been everywhere together. And we were down in a little town called Lake Jackson down southwest of Houston. And since I took such good care of my health, I take blood pressure medicine and cholesterol medicine and all that sort of stuff. I've had bypass surgery. And so I go in there in the bathroom in the hotel to take my medicine. And there's not any plastic cups in there, but Gary left one in there that had a little bit of water in it. And I thought, I don't mind drinking after Gary. So I used his cup. I took my medicine and I go in there that night to take my night medicine, and his teeth are in that cup. And I said, Gary, did you put your teeth in that cup last night? He said, yeah, why? I said, hell, I drank out of it. He said, well, that stuff I soak them in kills germs. And he's a little goofy too, because the next morning he got up before I did. He went down to the lobby and went for a walk. So he got a cup of coffee for me and brought it up. And he was going to warm it up in the microwave, and he couldn't find the start button. That's because he had put it in the safe. And I came home and told my wife these stories, and she said, "Y'all really need a chaperone. So we probably do. Somehow we make it all right. But I grew up like a lot of you guys in an alcoholic home. We know my dad had at least 25 DWIs. That was back when it was possible to get that many. He went to prison 3 times, drunk when he got off the bus the last time. Uh, Ended up telling me, he said, you won't live to be 35. I sincerely believe him now. I was 31 when I got sober, and he died 51 years old. So I've outlived him. I'm 66, so I've lived 15 years longer than he did already. But we moved all over the place. I was a new kid. I hated that. And by the way, if you're new on here, my dad didn't make me an alcoholic. How I was brought up didn't make me an alcoholic. The stuff I lived through as a kid did not make me an alcoholic. Um, but what I'm getting at, I had the perfect example of a person that would let me know don't ever touch alcohol. You see what it's done to your family. And so my mother tried to balance the scales. She took us to church, and I got involved in church. I liked church, sang in the youth choir. I made good grades. I was involved in sports. I played baseball, basketball, football. I played in the band. I was a drummer and I was good at it. I was obsessed with it actually. Won a bunch of awards and medals and all this sort of stuff. And you know, I'm in rural East Texas. I'm in Jacksonville, Texas. I'm sort of halfway between Shreveport and Dallas. And we moved to Grand Isle, Louisiana. And I don't know about you, but I always felt like I didn't fit in. I wasn't a part of. I didn't measure up. I felt inferior. And I ran with the in crowd also, but I never felt like I was really a part of the in crowd. And we moved to Grand Isle, Louisiana, which is a little small island south of New Orleans. And I couldn't understand those people down there, you know, those Cajuns. And I really, really felt apart from and different then. And they picked up on my Texas accent and they started calling me Texian. Well, that just magnified it, you know. And so the first thing I ever did, I smoked some of that non-habit forming marijuana. Now I've got buddies. My high school best friend, he still smokes a little every day. He's built a hell of a business, does great. Um, when I smoked marijuana, it intensified that feeling in me, not good enough, don't fit in, and all that sort of stuff. And you know, I was curious. You know, if I ever drank, would I be like my dad? I had no idea that alcoholism was progressive. I just assumed he was like that. He seemed like he was like that my whole life, you know. And I ran around with a guy that was 16. I was 14. And one day he said, "Hey, why don't we go get something to drink?" So really the curiosity and the peer pressure, I guess, got me. I said, okay. So he went and got us 2 bottles of what I've declared the national first drink of Alcoholics Anonymous, Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill wine. And there were no directions on how to drink it, how much to drink. I just drank the whole bottle. But I was amazed before I was halfway through. I began to know a new freedom and a new happiness. I comprehended the word serenity and I knew peace. Fear of those Cajuns left me. And you guys are familiar with those, some of those terms as the 9 step promises. And it sounds like I'm making a joke. I'm not making a joke whatsoever. If you would have asked me, Ricky, how do you feel since you've drank that Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill? I'm sure I wouldn't have used those words, but that's exactly what happened to me. So, in effect, what really happened to me, I had my very first spiritual experience from the spirit alcohol. And my mind slammed that in for future reference immediately. I had no idea the obsession began right then. I just knew I felt fantastic. I went home and I didn't beat my mother like I saw my dad do. I didn't fall off the bar stool at the old trailer house we lived in. Man, life was, I had never felt that fantastic in my life. And to me, I felt like this is how I should always feel. And I didn't drink every day after that, but you know, I was about 25 years sober, and I'm not one of those that, you know, delves into my inner child or that sort of stuff. But I just kind of look back at, you know, where did things really take a turn? Well, right after I took my first drink, because right after I took my first drink, I no longer cared about grades anymore. I quit all sports. I quit the band, and I avoided church if at all possible. So October of my 9th grade, we moved to where I live now, Jacksonville. And I go to school here and I see the in crowd and I don't want to run with them. The ones I want to run with are the guys standing just across the street from school property smoking cigarettes in the morning. And all I wanted to do in school was barely get by. As long as I passed, that's all I cared. And I skipped school a lot. In my senior year, I'm a week from graduating. I've got my cap and gown and all that. And 2 of my teachers got together and my name came up. And I got 18 days unexcused in 3 classes and I couldn't graduate. And it was one of those deals that, you know, it wasn't important to me until they said, you can't have it. I get sober. I'm sober, I think 6 years, 5, 6 years. And I thought, I wonder what it'll take for me to get my real diploma. not a GED, but my high school diploma. So I go to the high school, same old counselor's there. He's quite a bit grayer now. I'm 36 years old. And I said, is there any way I could get my high school diploma? And so he looked up my records. I was a half a credit short. He said, why don't you study this book here, Home and Family Living? He said, at your age, you've already experienced a lot of this. And then take a test. And so I did that. I made a 93, and I'm a 1995 graduate of Jacksonville High School. And he asked me, he said, now, when I do this diploma, do you want me to put 1977 on it? I said, no, just leave it 95, and my oldest son graduated 5 years after I graduated. And I've never needed a diploma, but for me, that's Alcoholics Anonymous, doing things I never would have done. So, but I got the job that um, it was actually perfect for an alcoholic. I went to work offshore in the oil field, and I'd work real hard out there and, be pretty physically fit and eat real good. And I'd come home for a week, and all I had was a car payment and insurance, and I made really good money. And I'd come in and blow every cent that I had, and then go to my mother and borrow money from her to get back to Louisiana to go back offshore. Did that for a number of years, and I met this little gal that I should have never met, and she would say the same thing. She was a cowgirl, and I was not a cowboy. We'd have a fight if the radio got turned on. I wanted to hear Judas Priest and Led Zeppelin, and she wanted to hear uh, Reba McEntire and Hank Williams Jr. and that sort of stuff. We just didn't get along. But we had two kids, and man, I treated her horribly. We're married 6 weeks, and I got caught with another woman. That's the kind of piece of crap of a husband I was. So we divorced, and you know, in the doctor's opinion, Dr. Silkworth describes this craving that happens after an alcoholic pours the drink in. Page 44 describes that. It says, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you drink, and that's me. And the craving doesn't happen when I'm sober. The craving happens after I pour it in. I've never seen anybody crave alcohol harder after they started drinking besides me, my dad, or my youngest son. And I hope I'll tell you about my youngest son eventually. But, um, I just wanted to go chase women and have a few drinks. And I'm the kind of guy, I come out of a blackout. It's some of the worst times you can come out of a blackout. I came out of a blackout one time, and I'm standing there talking to cops. And I don't know why I'm there and what had happened. I had pulled off, I was on a dirt road, and I pulled over and passed out in my car, and I had a reserve deputy's driveway blocked. He couldn't get to his house, so I go to jail again. And another time, I'm at a bring your own booze bar over here at a place called Lake Palestine. And I had wrecked my car, and that was another habit I had. And so I'd ridden over there. It was about 20 miles from where I live. Rode over there, and when the club was over with, everybody's gone. I look up, and all my friends are gone. So I come up with the bright idea. I'm going to hitchhike to my parents' house, who live like 50 miles north of there. And I get out on the highway and stick my thumb out. And one guy picks me up and takes me a few miles. And he said, this is as far as I'm going. And so I got out, and man, at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, there's no cars coming. And I got tired. So I came up with a bright idea. I'll lay down here on the shoulder of the highway. And when I hear a car coming, I'll jump up and stick my thumb out. Well, I came to, and people are standing over me, saying, are you crazy? What's wrong with you? All that sort of stuff. And thank God we didn't have cell phones, or I would have went to jail again then. And they left, and I knew the first one that got home would be calling the cops, saying, you got somebody out there passing out on the shoulder of the highway. So there was a ditch about 8 or 10 feet down beside me with some of those cattails sticking out of it. I just went down in the ditch and passed out. And Woke up the next morning, I had all these little red dots over me. I guess ants had bit on me during the night. I don't know, but that's how I get when all I'm going to do is go have a few drinks. And guys, I used to parrot a lot of stuff I heard in meetings. And what I would say was I drank to get drunk. And I'm reading the doctor's opinion one day, and I realized, no, I wasn't drinking to get drunk. I was drinking just like Dr. Silkworth says we drink. We're restless, irritable, and discontented unless we can experience a sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks. I just wanted a few drinks to make me feel normal, to make me feel like you guys look. But I've got the physical allergy. The craving kicks in. So I meet wife number two that, we're married, and I promise you guys, without Alcoholics Anonymous and probably without Al Anon, we wouldn't be about to celebrate our 40th anniversary this coming November 15th. Just unbelievable. So I meet her and I'm going to treat her better. Man, I didn't treat her any better than I did the first one. And I'll get on through this drunkenness pretty quick, but I want to tell you about my first trip to Alcoholics Unanimous. A guy offered me a job, and it was my dream job. I had always dreamed of being a salesman for this company, but I never would go apply for the job because I'm not good enough. And there's probably I've got a reputation, and I know they wouldn't hire me, so I never asked for a job. The owner asked me would I go to work for him, and I did. And the funny part, he hired me in place of a guy they just fired for drinking and doing drugs. So uh, I'm with them 6 weeks. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm in the owner's Suburban, and I come out of a blackout, standing there talking to cops again. And you can't say, why are we here? Is there a problem? You got to figure stuff out real quick. And I figured it out very quick. All the traffic, if I remember right, there was 3 lanes that were going one way, and I was pulled over the other way. So I was obviously going the wrong way on the one way. It's really, I don't see how I never killed someone or myself. It's hard to believe because that happens to people. And so I'm the nicest guy in the world a cop pulls over until I find out I'm going to jail. And then I've got a smart mouth and I'll tell them, my taxes pay for your job, all that sort of stuff. And so I told the cop, I said, hey, I need to pee. I said, I'll just step over here on the other side of the Suburban. And they said, no, you won't. And they handcuffed me and put me in the back seat of the cop car. Well, the breath machine gets there that they'd been waiting on. They open the door and the floorboard's full of pee. And they got a resentment. And I was the laughing stock of the Shelby County Jail up there in Memphis. And man, I see that jail occasionally on that show, The First 48. And it was no fun being in there. I'm in there for 8 days. I had a cellmate giving me cigarettes, and that 8th day I'm in there, I'm in the chow line for breakfast, and there was a guy that I ran into that'd been in the big holding tank, when I first got there. He said, hey, let me give you some advice about this jail. I said, you bet. He said, whatever you do, don't take any cigarettes from anyone. I said, why not? He said, because they'll want sexual favors in return. Man, I got back to my cell and I started reading the Bible. And I started doing some heavy praying, I'm telling you. And I got out that evening. Long story short, I get home and my wife, she's like 7 or 8 months pregnant. She's just, at wit's end, poor girl. And, uh, well, didn't know what to do. And she said, why don't you try AA? And her mother was in AA. Her mother got sent to the wrong place. Her mother was a prescription pill addict, and they sent her to AA. I've never seen a woman drunk. Obviously, she didn't stay because she felt different all the time, and she ended up abusing pills long enough that she died at an early age also. But anyway, so I go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I make 2 meetings. and I see the steps on the wall, and there's two of them I'm out on. One of them is the fifth step, and I recognize that right off as confession. And my grandmother said, "We're Baptist. We don't do confession. That's for Catholics. You know, they do that." So I wasn't going to do that. And the ninth step, I knew I might have to go see that ex-wife and maybe admit a little part of this marriage going bad could possibly be my fault. And there's no way ever I'm doing that because I hate her. And she probably hated me a little worse than I hated her. And I saw the answer was God. So I went back to church. And guys, I've done this over and over. And I know about half of you have done this because I've asked people to raise their hands. And it's always about half the room, sometimes more than that. But I'd go to church and the preacher would say a real spiritual message or whatever, and I'd feel that conviction. And he gets done, and the organ starts playing, and they start singing that song, Just As I Am. And man, I feel more of that conviction. And at least where I went to church, the preacher's not going home until somebody gets saved. You know, everybody's looking at their watch. They're wanting to go watch the Cowboys, or they used to want to watch them. And he would say, you know, the Lord's telling me there's one more here, and I know it's me he's talking about. So I get up, I go down the aisle, and I turn my life over to God. And I leave there, and I feel absolutely fantastic for a few days. And it never lasted. And I did that several times. And I used to wonder, you know, why did that not stay with me? You know, what's the deal? I see these other people in church, they just continue going and they love it and their life gets better. It never lasted for me. And I got in Alcoholics Anonymous and did a fourth step, and I found out why. You know, the third step, I thought it said we turned something over. It says we made a decision. And at the end of that, though, it says, though our decision, talking about the third step, was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. I had no idea there were things within me very effectively blocking God out. So, anyway, so I went to church and I drank again and went to jail again. And this time, this wasn't the first time this happened, but I came to in a jail and I had to ask my cellmates, what jail am I in? And they had just built a new county jail here. And I'm the kind of guy, when I get out of jail, I feel so remorseful. I'm a jailbird. I'm a piece of crap. I'm a sorry husband, a sorry father. But there's only one thing on the planet that'll take that away, and that's a few more drinks. And I go drink again. And I woke up August the 20th, 1990. I stayed out there for 3 years, and I'm gasping for air, and my heart's racing. And see, my dad had died 2 years prior to this. My mother had divorced my dad because he was a no good, sorry alcoholic. She married another alcoholic. She went to wake him up 2 months prior to this, and he wouldn't wake up. He'd had an esophageal hemorrhage and bled to death. So when I wake up in that condition, I had that moment of clarity. If I take another drink, I'm going to the cemetery. I believe it much stronger now than I even did then. So I thought, well, maybe they're right. Maybe alcohol is the problem. And if you're new on here, I'm sure you know that alcohol is not the problem. People were telling me alcohol is a problem. Well, hell, that is so simple. I've got a 7-year-old grandson named Lincoln, and I go to him and say, Lincoln, that alcohol is my problem. I drink that alcohol. My life is disastrous. What should I do? And he'd say, well, Papa, don't drink alcohol. I mean, that's as simple as 2 plus 2. But see, when I stop drinking, I might feel pretty good about the fact that I'm doing the right thing. I'll start feeling a little bit better physically, and I've got a better outlook. I'm getting those attaboys, you know. And I wake up one morning and I got a little bit of depression and I got a little anxiety. And it's like tomorrow I wake up, I got a little bit more of that. And the bill collectors keep calling. They're wanting their payments that I can't pay. And all this stuff starts stacking up on me. And I finally reach a point that something's got to give. It's like Clancy talked about, the invisible spring inside me, that it gets a little tighter and a little tighter, and the day comes, I can't take it anymore. And I go have a drink and I start that cycle over and over. So I couldn't stay away from a drink like it says on 34. Man, I love Bill's wording. You know, he used the word baffled and baffling. And he said, this is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, this utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. So, long story short, uh, I went to Alcoholics Anonymous in Tyler, Texas, just north of me. And I'm sitting in my truck. I'm not going in early because somebody might want to interrogate me or something, you know. And so I wait till about 3 minutes till 8. And the meeting started at 8. But I watch it as the people are walking in. I'm watching them. And I told myself, I don't know where this thought came from, but I told myself, okay, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to do whatever they tell me to do. I don't care how drastic it is, how stupid it sounds. I'm out of answers and I'm out of plans. And I'm the kind of guy too that even if I was sober, it seemed like I made the wrong decision. It seemed like everything blew up in my face, drunk or sober. And I'm at a point now where I'm miserable if I'm drinking and I'm miserable if I'm not drinking. So I went in there with that attitude. And the first thing I did when I went in was I listened to how long people had been sober. And they were sober like so far out there that I couldn't fathom it, like 2 years, you know. And if you're new here, I know what you're thinking when you hear the subject working with others. You say, well, I haven't been sober long enough. I haven't done enough or whatever. You know, it says, I believe on page 129, that during those first days of convalescence, this will do more to ensure his sobriety than anything else. And that's trying to help another alcoholic. But what I heard in that meeting, there was a guy 2 chairs over from me. This is in August. He got sober in June, and I told myself he's not getting to his vehicle when this meeting's over with without me stopping him and finding out how in the hell have you been sober 2 months. I didn't care about 2 years or 30 years. And so, you know, I stopped that guy and I didn't know what to do. He kind of, you know, showed me the ropes a little bit and he mentioned getting a sponsor. So, like I said, I was willing to do whatever. So I saw a guy that it seemed like life was going pretty good for him, and I asked him to sponsor me. And guys, I had no idea. I had just asked the wrong man to sponsor me. His answer was to go to a lot of meetings. You know, I went to meetings at that group and I liked the meetings. I felt good there. And about 30 minutes later, the squirrel cage is running, you know, and I can't sleep. And I've got all this stuff going on. What I've got is this bad case of unmanageability. And for me, that's not jail. It's not overdrawn in the checking account. It's not none of that stuff. For me, what it is, it's on page 52, where it says we're having trouble with personal relationships. We can't control our emotional nature. We're a prey to misery and depression. We have a feeling of uselessness. We're full of fear. We're unhappy. We can't make a living. That's what's going on within me. And what I've come to find out that every alcoholic that comes to Alcoholics Anonymous that have hit their bottom, that's what they've got, whether their butler dropped them off from a limousine or they rode a bicycle. That's what we all have in common if our life is unmanageable. And mine was, I mean, in a bad way. So little by little, the pressure's building up on me and the meetings are starting to get a little bit dull and my life has not gotten better. And I go to this sponsor, he wouldn't answer his phone. So I see him at a meeting and I said, man, something's got to give. You know, I mean, I don't know what to do. He said, you need to go to more meetings. And I thought, hell, why didn't I think of that? It feels good when I'm in the meetings. So I started going to more meetings. And it's almost like the more meetings I went to, the worse my life got. And I took a little inventory in my head and I said, okay, my wife wants to have less to do with me today than the day I stopped drinking. My ex-wife wants me in jail a little bit worse than the day I stopped drinking. I owe more money than the day I stopped drinking. And my life's not any better. My life is worse. The only difference is I'm not drinking and I don't have any relief. And for the first time in my life, I am seriously thinking about committing suicide, sitting in an AA meeting, not drinking, one day at a time, going to all these freaking AA meetings. And we read about Fred in the big book. By the way, I love Fred. Uh, Matter of fact, little short story. My wife got bit by a copperhead in 2020. She stepped out of the car on a copperhead, bit her on the heel. So we got two cats to keep outside, because they'll kill snakes. And one of them had a nervous disposition, so I named him Jim. Well, obviously, I had to name the other one Fred, and he ran off. We haven't heard from Fred for a while. So anyway, we're in the meeting. We read about Fred, and I don't know what we're reading. My head's running. Uh, they start calling on people. I don't hear what anyone says. And it comes this one certain guy. He's my first Alcoholics Anonymous hero. And he had one of the, I call it a preacher's voice. He could talk in a normal tone here, and 2 blocks away, you could hear him. And he said what jumped out at him was the bottom of page 42, where Fred said, quite as importantly was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. And I latched onto that sentence and I found out that you can change sponsors. So I got a different sponsor. Now, here's what this sponsor did. He shared his experience, strength, and hope with me. And it was left up to me if I wanted to do it, when I wanted to do it, and how I wanted to do it. Life got better. But then we're in meetings and I read about happy, joyous, and free. Man, I'm nowhere near that. That's something that's I thought unattainable. But I would lie to you guys. I would say in meeting, yeah, I'm happy, joyous, and free when I wasn't. And my marriage starts going downhill. Sober, we're back together. We got a new baby. We're making a little money now. We're not behind on our bills, but she and I are getting along horribly. And I see this man when I'm sober 2.5 years. He's excited about life, not just in the AA meetings. He's excited about living life outside the meetings. He loves life out there. And I asked him if he would sponsor me, and he didn't say yes. He gave me some paperwork and he said, here, look this over. It tells you what we're going to be doing. If you don't want to do it, I'll help you find a sponsor. But if I'm going to sponsor you, this is what we're going to do. I agreed to do that. The guy starts taking me through the book. He took me to the forward of the first edition where it says, um, well, drew a blank. I think I can find it though. Well, I found it in my head already. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. And he said, we recover from alcoholism. The title page of the big book says, Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. Then he took me over to page 20 and it says, you may already be asking, what do I have to do to get over this? And it says, it's the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. Then he took me to page 29 and it says, further on, clear cut directions are given showing how we recovered. So he summed that up that the program of recovery in the big book is precise, specific, and clear cut on how to recover from alcoholism. And we go through the book. He hits the high notes. He asked me, did I believe in God? I said, yes. We moved right on. We didn't spend 5 minutes in We Agnostics. And we get over there to how it works. And he said, I need to see if you're convinced of this. A, that your alcoholic can't manage your own life. I said, yes. B, that probably no human power could have relieved your alcoholism. Yes. C, that God could and would if he were sought. I said, yes. He said, You've done the first two steps. And I looked at him like he was a mind reader. I said, how do you know I've done the first two steps? He said, read the next sentence. And the next sentence says, being convinced we're at step three. It's too simple, guys. I need something complicated and intricate and something I can sink my teeth in. I could not believe the simplicity of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Long story short, the man changed my marriage in less than a week. He asked me, he said, what have you done about your marriage? I said, well, some people in AA told me to turn it over to God. And he looked at me and he said, God didn't want it, did he? I said, hell, I guess not. It got worse since I turned it over to him. And he said, this is not a program of turning your problems over to God. This is a program of you finding out what God would have you do, and you do it. And what we turn over is the outcome to God. He said, what kind of marriage do you want? And I said, 50-50 marriage. He said, you're screwed. I said, how? He said, that means you're going to expect 50%. He said, we give 100 and expect nothing in return. He said, if you want to turn something over to God, I'll give you a little experiment. He said, when you leave my house, he said, go over here to the mall and go write $25,000 worth of hot checks and turn them over to God and see what happens. He said, God will turn them over to the sheriff and you're about to be in jail. Then he asked me, he said, what do you do to contribute in your home? I said, I bring a paycheck home. He said, everybody does that. He said, how do you contribute in your home? And I was baffled. Like, what are you talking about? When you go home from work, what do you do? Well, I like Discovery Channel and ESPN a whole lot, and my recliner. And my wife's in there cooking supper, washing dishes, sweeping, mopping, washing clothes, drying clothes, folding clothes, hanging clothes, bathing kids and all that. And I'm a little ticked off because I'm not getting praised because I'm not taking a drink today. You know, one thing I found out in that inventory is that I'm inconsiderate. And guys, I'm ashamed of this. I was sober about 30 years thinking that inconsiderate meant I didn't consider her quite enough. That I looked it up. That's not what it means. It means I didn't consider her at all, and I didn't. Hell, I couldn't because I'm always thinking about me and how I feel. I can't consider someone else. So anyway, this sponsor, he changed all that. He had me start working with others and doing all this sort of stuff, you know, and that's been one of the biggest blessings of my life. And, you know, I say this all the time. I had more friends in Finland than I had in the world when I got sober. I mean, this is the most incredible deal. I sponsored some guys. They would come close to giving their life to me, and I would them too. You know, just man, we've got. I'm telling you, we're in a small town, less than 15,000, and we've got an electric Alcoholics Anonymous group. And we had there's a guy I've sponsored him ever since he got sober. He's sober 30 years. His wife's sober. They do a hamburger cookout the first Wednesday of each month at their home at 6 p.m. And then at 8 p.m. we go to a big book study at our group, and people from all over come. So this first Wednesday of this month, we had 72 people at our little AA group, you know, here in town. And I mean, people are ecstatic. They're excited about AA, you know, and we're all on the same page in our group. We kind of had a mismatch of people. We had our meeting makers and man, we had 13 meetings a week. And this may surprise some of you, but we have 2 meetings a week now. And our group is so much better. We have more time to spend with our families, to go out of town, you know, to support guys in our group or gals in our group that are speaking. We run together. We've got I'll put this up here. We give these out. It says East Texas Posse on it. And we've got another one here. It's sort of cute. It's got a hamburger on it. And what it says on there is, I had a hamburger in Jacksonville. So if you come to the cookout, you know, to get a hamburger, you get one of those buttons, you know. But we're just so excited about Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know, I'm as excited or probably more excited about Alcoholics Anonymous than I ever have been. And if you're new, you're thinking, man, how the hell does that happen? And this is the last place I wanted to come. But the more I do in this deal, uh, the more benefits I get, and it's absolutely crazy. I live in a house, and my kids got to grow up in a house of recovery where it's quiet in our house. There's no one screaming, hollering, arguing, and bickering all the time. Uh, this place was a safe place for my kids to grow up. My oldest daughter, she lives about 3 hours away in a little small town west of Fort Worth. Her and her husband bought a B&B or whatever you call it. My daughter has a big book on the shelf of that B&B in case someone rents it and they may have a problem or whatever. My daughter's not an alcoholic, but she loves the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous because we've had these long, deep conversations. In my mind, always goes back, well, Heather, what I found out in the big book, and I'll tell her. So she wanted a big book. She read it. She loves it. Uh, my oldest son, he went really goofy. He became a professional bull rider, but he was good at it. He was a rookie of the year in 2002. Uh, he's not alcoholic. He has this deal where he feels, let's see, what does he say? He feels it and he paces himself. That's that's what he does that I try to do. Uh, my youngest son Logan, he was 21 years old, and I would have bet you everything I own that he was an alcoholic exactly like me. And it was DWI, jail, 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 failed relationship, just a mess. And I'm with him the last time he drank. We were at my oldest son's bachelor party, and we're in Dallas. He goes to jail. And on the way home, he said, the next day when he got out of jail, he said, I'm so embarrassed and humiliated. And I just said, I understand, done it many times. I said, but for me, the humiliation and embarrassment would start to wear off after a couple of weeks. And I'd begin to think, how can I drink and this not happen? He said, well, I'm going to call Zane when I get home. That's the guy I sponsored for 30 years. And I thank God. He made 2 AA meetings. He's never been back, and his life is soared. Another thing, if you'd have asked me, you're going to have a kid one day that gets sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, we're going to let you pick his sobriety date. He landed on it. His sobriety date's AA's birthday, June the 10th, 2013. He's been sober 12 years. He does not need Alcoholics Anonymous. His life is just, and he's had a lot of trials and low spots. He had a son born with half a heart. That was, man, all these surgeries, and he could die, at any of them. But anyway, I'm getting to this point. Uh, if you're new here and you're wondering, well, I don't know if I'm alcoholic or not. See, I told you how I am when I'm not drinking. I'm restless, irritable, and discontented. I'm depressed. I have anxiety and this sort of stuff. And I told you how I was before I ever had my first drink. Didn't fit in, wasn't good enough. So me and Logan are we're going to a golf tournament together about 3 years ago. And we talk about women and everything, you know. But I told him, I said, Logan, I said, uh, when you were growing up, did you feel like you weren't good enough, you didn't fit in or whatever? And he looked at me like I was crazy. He said, no, I never felt like that, Dad. Why? I said, well, that's how I felt. I said, what about when you quit drinking? Did you go through a lot of depression and anxiety and stuff? He said, no. He said, once the hangover was over with, he said, I was fine. See, he doesn't have that unmanageability I was talking about. And I told you guys, I'm one day from 35 years sober. All I have to do is quit doing these disciplines, these daily disciplines. And I don't mean meetings, just quit doing the daily disciplines in the midst of going to meetings. And I get that ick, that uh, restless, irritable, discontented. That's why I have to keep doing this, and that's why he doesn't. But he gave Alcoholics Anonymous one of the greatest compliments I think you could give AA. He told my wife about probably 3 years ago, he's got these little stair step boys that are 7, 5, and 4. He told my wife, he said, Mom, he said, I want to raise my kids exactly like you and Dad raised us. And she told me that, and I thought, oh my God, I've never heard anybody say that. I certainly didn't say that about my parents, you know. And of course, my ego's known to, take a lot of stuff and uh, take off with my ego. Uh, and at first I thought, oh yeah, super dad. Yeah. And that's a compliment to me. And it took me about 2 days. And I said, oh no, that's not a compliment to me. That's a compliment to Alcoholics Anonymous, because I learned to raise kids, be a husband, be an employee, all that stuff from you guys. You know, I was taught early on, my sponsor told me, he said, just remember this, your kids are not burdens that have been put on you. Your kids are gifts from God. Treat them like they are, and I can tell you, I've got a fantastic relationship with all four of my kids. And anyway, I don't know. There's not enough adjectives in the English language for me to describe Alcoholics Anonymous. Chris and I were at a conference weekend before last. I was at the Texas State Convention last week, but we were at a conference week before last. And I've been to a lot of conferences and seen a lot of themes, but this one, their theme was the effect was electric. And that's in Bill's story after his surrender and stuff. But, I told him, I said, the effect is still electric with me. It's electric in my family. It's electric in my job. It's electric, at my AA group. My God, how could you not love life? With that going on, my old grand sponsor told me years ago. He would say to people in the meeting, he'd say, "Do you know this is not hospice here?" He said, I've been in a lot of meetings where it's like hospice. Hospice is where you hold hands and you die a little bit more comfortably. This is a place that we learn to live and live better than we ever have. And what my sponsor told me in the beginning of that, where Ebby came to Bill and Bill's talking about his friend, he said he was taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. What this sponsor told me, he said, if your life's not better than you can ever remember it, and he said, I don't mean better than when you were drinking. If your life's not better than you can ever remember it, he said, you may be working some kind of a program, but it's not Alcoholics Anonymous. Because if you work this program precisely how it's laid out, your life will be better than you can ever remember it. And mine wasn't, but in a short period of time, he got me there. And man, I'm so grateful. We talk about all the time how we got dropped in the right hands of people that, guys, if you travel out there, I go to some meetings, I just want to cry because I feel so sorry for the people that are there, because they're going to die, because you never hear Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the saddest thing in the world. And because I'm in there 10 or 15 minutes and I say to myself, man, I'd probably be in a cemetery if this was what I found, but and man, I want everybody to have the same chance that I had, and the sad thing though, it's not always like that everywhere, but I'm sure grateful it happened for me. And I guess my time's about up. Thank you guys so much. I think I might have spoken on this meeting before. Is there a Stephen T? Stephen Todd asked me to speak one time. Is it this group? Anyway, that's been 2, 3, 4 years ago, but thank God for Zoom, and thank you guys for listening. I appreciate so much you having me on here. Thanks.